Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into one of the most singular, intensely personal, and frankly electrifying careers in modern music.
Mm.
The extraordinary decades-long journey of American singer-songwriter and pianist Tori Amos.
Yeah.
When you look at her stack of work, it's not just songs. It's a lifetime of resistance, lyrical warfare, and, well, relentless artistic evolution.
She's a genre unto herself.
She really is, and her story is just a masterclass in maintaining integrity against all that institutional pressure.
That's the critical lens we need to adopt, I think. Our mission today is to synthesize a profoundly complex legacy by, tracing a continuous thread.
Right.
We're moving from her status as a recognized classical child prodigy to a revolutionary artist known for these massive conceptual albums.
Albums that tackle everything.
Everything. From sexual trauma to ancient Gnostic gospels, all while consistently offering some of the sharpest, most fearless political and social commentary in contemporary music.
And what's crucial to understand, and we'll get into this, is that she consistently forced the industry to follow her esoteric, highly personal rules rather than the other way around.
Exactly. She bent them to her will.
And for you, the learner, who needs the key knowledge distilled fast, here is the immediate hook we are chasing.
Okay.
We are going to explore the nuts and bolts of her technical genius, specifically the fact that she was playing professionally in bars at 13.
At 13, yeah.
And crucially, how her possession of chromesthesia, this rare, fascinating way of seeing music, directly dictated her compositional choices.
We'll also detail her famous high-stakes fights with multiple record labels that led her to literally create her own autonomous studio.
And perhaps most importantly, we're going to trace the astonishing, deeply conceptual architecture of her later work, right up to the new, highly provocative political concepts she has planned for 2026.
So this isn't just biography.
No, it's a study in creative survival. So let's begin at the very root of her artistry. She was born Myra Ellen Amos on August 20-time, 1963.
In Newton, North Carolina.
Right. And the family dynamic is immediately central to her future work. Her family soon relocated to Baltimore, Maryland, because her father, Edison Amos, moved his Methodist ministry there.
And that context is... It's everything. The fact that she was born and raised within that intensely spiritual, structured, and, let's be honest, often patriarchal religious environment.
It's absolutely fundamental.
It is. It's the key to understanding her decades of lyrical conflict and all that theological exploration.
It definitely sets the stage for the later rebellion inherent in her music, but even before that structured environment truly took hold, there was just the raw, almost mystical nature of her musical gift.
Oh, yeah. I mean, her older siblings took traditional piano lessons, but Amos was entirely self-taught in the early stages.
The sources say she could reproduce complex pieces of music she had heard only once.
When she was just 2 years old. And by age 3, she was composing original songs.
That's not just technical talent.
No. It was a deep, intuitive, almost physical manifestation of sound.
This intense, inherent musicality is where we find the definitive key insight into her compositional style. Chromesthesia.
Right.
Now, for those who might not be familiar, chromesthesia is a type of synesthesia where sounds, music in particular, automatically and involuntarily evoke an experience of color, shape, and pattern.
And the source material has her own description of what happens when she composes or listens. It's fascinating.
It is.
She describes the music as manifesting itself in a unique expression of the architecture of color and light. She says that a song appears as light filament once I've cracked it.
Like she's unlocking a visual code.
Exactly. She likens the experience to trying to imagine the best kaleidoscope ever, where you focus not just on the overall pattern, but on each element's stunning original detail.
So she's not just hearing notes.
She's receiving visual mandates. It's a completely different process.
I find it incredible that she can trace this synesthetic experience back to a single moment in childhood. She pinpoints being 3 years old, listening to a complex piece by the Hungarian composer Bela Bartok.
And she claims she suddenly visited a configuration that wasn't on this earth.
So if we connect this to her writing, her compositional decisions are likely driven less by traditional theory, which she admits to disliking, and more by an intuitive visual mandate to harmonize the architecture of light she is seeing.
Precisely. That profound internal mechanism helps explain why her harmonic language is so complex, why it often shifts keys unexpectedly or employs dissonance that feels emotionally rather than theoretically driven.
It's a completely euphoric internal architecture guiding the external sound.
It's a truly original process that sets her apart from almost any other contemporary songwriter.
And just a quick note on the name change?
Oh, yeah, she wasn't Tori yet.
Not yet. She only officially became Tori much later. She had been performing under her middle name Ellen, but permanently adopted Tori after a friend's boyfriend remarked that she looked like a Torrey pine, a tree native to the West Coast.
A little bit of California foreshadowing there.
Moving from that internal world to the external structure, that raw gift led her directly to the most stringent classical education possible.
Peabody.
She became the youngest student ever admitted to the preparatory division of the Peabody Institute in Baltimore. She entered at age 5 in 1968.
5 years old. She studied classical piano at the highest level there until 1974. This early immersion in Bach, Chopin, and Bartók gave her the technical foundation that, frankly, few pop artists ever achieve.
But that rigid structure didn't last, and here is where the story of rebellion truly begins.
It had to break at some point.
Her scholarship was discontinued when she was only 11 years old. She was asked to leave.
And the reason, she asserts, was twofold and entirely predictable given her internal process. Her increasing interest in the improvisation and freedom of rock and pop music
Clashed with the curriculum.
heavily. And she had a deep, deep dislike for the mechanical process of sight reading from sheet music.
She was, in essence, being penalized for prioritizing her ear and her internal light structures over strict adherence to tradition.
Absolutely. The narrative anchor of her career, that conflict with authority, began incredibly early. Not just with religion, but with music itself.
And once she was removed from Peabody, she pivoted straight into the only place she could perform her own music: professional performance.
The family moved to Silver Spring, Maryland, and by age 13, she was playing 6 nights a week at piano bars and gay bars throughout the Washington, D.C. area.
The profound tension and duality established by this image is perhaps the most defining anecdote of her life.
You've got this young, classically trained virtuoso playing raw, adult material.
And she is chaperoned, incredibly, by her father,
who is still a Methodist minister. It's an unbelievable image.
The religious structure that provided the foundation for her early life was now simultaneously protecting and enabling her rebellion in venues that were often outside the bounds of conventional society.
That tension is the core material for her first decade of lyrical conflict. It's all right there.
And that early performance life also produced her very first single in 1980.
Right. Baltimore.
She co-wrote it with her brother, Mike Amos, for a competition involving the Baltimore Orioles baseball team.
It did not win the contest.
No, it didn't win, but it was released locally as a 7-inch single. It's a small footnote, but it signals her determined early focus on being a recording artist, not just a performer.
She was already thinking about records. So after years navigating that grueling D.C. piano bar circuit, which really honed her stage presence and technical stamina, she made the critical move to Los Angeles in 1984.
To pursue a major label career.
Exactly. And this leads us directly to the necessary commercial misstep of her career, the pop-rock group Kant Tori Read, formed in 1986.
That band name, derived from her Peabody struggles, is such an early sign of her self-awareness and her humor. But I'm curious, wasn't this band really meant to be a commercial compromise?
Oh, completely.
She was pushed by the industry to shed the singer-songwriter image and embrace the, mid-'80s big hair rock aesthetic.
Absolutely. It was a conscious attempt to make her sound commercially palatable by conforming to the prevailing pop rock trends. The lineup was actually pretty high profile.
Right, it had Steve Caton on guitar,
who would eventually play on all her subsequent solo albums until 1999, and the drummer was Matt Sorum,
who later achieved massive rock success with Guns N' Roses and Velvet Revolver.
So it was a solid professional band, but the material was just forced.
And the band's self-titled 1988 debut album was a complete commercial failure.
A total flop.
What stands out to me is her brutal self-assessment of the record. She once remarked, "The only good thing about that album is my ankle-high boots."
It wasn't just a failure of sales. It was a fundamental misfire in terms of her artistic identity,
which she attributes to significant interference from record executives who demanded a sound that, well, it just neutered the band's musical edge.
It was a classic case of an artist being molded by the label instead of leading the process. And this era includes a strange, almost cynical footnote.
Distant Storm.
Right. Fulfilling contractual obligations. She recorded this song she didn't even write for the 1988 film China O'Brien, and it was attributed to a fictional group called Tess Makes Good.
And she did the vocals for $150.
and was unaware for years that the song had even been used in the film. It just highlights her position at the time,
Yeah.
a commodity trying to survive within a contract system that didn't understand her talent.
Following that commercial disappointment and the band's disbanding, she was still chained to Atlantic Records under a long 6-record contract.
A huge commitment.
In 1989, Atlantic demanded a new solo record by March 1990. When her initial solo recordings, this intimate, piano-based material, were submitted, they were flatly declined.
Just rejected. The label wanted something radio-friendly, not raw confessionals.
But that rejection, however painful, was the crucial turning point.
It was. The label forced a reevaluation, but instead of compromising, she doubled down on what made her unique.
She went through a period of intense personal reworking and expansion of the material, which led to the release of Little Earthquakes in 1992.
And this album wasn't just her artistic breakthrough. It was an act of personal, public catharsis.
The album's power, I think, derived from its complete honesty. It recounted her raw, highly personal experiences.
Her religious upbringing, that conflict with her faith.
Sexual awakening, the struggle for identity, and most powerfully and controversially, her experience with sexual assault, addressed in tracks like Me and a Gun.
It was vulnerable, challenging, and unlike anything else being played on the radio at the time.
And the reception immediately confirmed her artistic instincts. It entered the UK charts at number 15, establishing her immediately in Europe.
It was a slower burn in the US, though. It peaked initially at only number 54 on the Billboard 200.
But it gained crucial traction through the video for Silent All These Years, which captured that specific mix of fragility and immense strength she conveyed.
This record fundamentally demonstrated that acoustic intimacy and vulnerability, when paired with her complex piano work, could find a massive audience.
And she solidified that success quickly with her second album, Under the Pink,
which was largely written and recorded in New Mexico in 1993 with her partner and engineer, Eric Ross.
It showed her ability to sustain that high level of intensity, exploring themes of female connection, power, and identity.
Most famously, maybe, in the track Cornflake Girl.
And the chart success metrics here are astonishing compared to the debut. It really illustrates how rapidly her audience was growing and maturing.
Under the Pink Yell debuted straight to number 1 in the UK upon its release in February 1994.
And it rocketed up to number 12 on the Billboard 200 in the US.
Which is a massive commercial jump from the previous album's modest number 54 peak. She proved she was not a flash in the pan.
That success allowed for a dramatic expansion of her live presentation, too. The subsequent Under the Pink tour in 1994 established the signature template for her live work.
She often performed solo, sitting between her majestic Bosendorfer piano and sometimes utilizing a second, more experimental instrument.
A prepared piano.
It's important to pause and appreciate the technical specificity of this. She didn't use just any piano. She used the Bosendorfer Imperial, known for its extra-large soundboard and extended range,
which allows it to handle her aggressive, often percussive playing style while still retaining clarity and depth.
And the prepared piano, used specifically for the track Bells for Her, is just a fascinating choice.
For those unfamiliar, the prepared piano technique involves placing objects, screws, bolts, rubber, or coins on or between the piano strings to alter the instrument's timbre.
Right. And in the case of Bells for Her, it gave the piano this muted, almost harpsichord-like percussive sound, completely transforming the acoustic feel of the instrument.
This choice instantly established the intimate, theatrical, and technically demanding nature of her live shows. She was using acoustic instruments like sound design tools.
She was already pushing the envelope. So the next phase is defined by conceptual expansion and, ironically, the beginning of the end of her relationship with Atlantic. Her third album, Boys for Pele from 1996, was a major sonic and conceptual departure.
It moved even further away from the mainstream, and the recording environment itself was highly unique.
Yeah, she utilized the natural acoustics of a disused church in Delgany, Ireland.
The environment perfectly mirrored the content, which dealt extensively with feminine power, the rejection of the male gaze, and intense personal turmoil following a breakup.
And the instrumentation also reflected this esoteric mood. Alongside the piano, she introduced the raw, aggressive texture of the harpsichord,
the ethereal quality of the harmonium, and the delicate sound of the clavichord.
And that inclusion of the harpsichord, which plucks the strings rather than striking them, fundamentally changed the attack of the music. It made the sound harder, more confrontational, compared to the rich, sustained tone of the piano.
It was erratic, challenging, sometimes difficult, and it earned mixed reviews.
Yet, it was her most successful simultaneous transatlantic release to date. It reached #2 on both the UK Top 40 and the Billboard 200.
Her audience was clearly ready to follow her into any conceptual space she chose, no matter how strange.
Which brings us to a piece of digital history that often gets overlooked.
Caught a light sneeze.
The first single from that album, it wasn't just a hit. It was the first full song released for streaming online prior to an album's release by a major artist.
Think about that. This was 1996. The internet was still a dial-up environment for most people.
Yet she was pioneering the digital distribution methods that would completely reshape the music industry a decade later. She was innovating not just musically, but technologically.
And that spirit of independence extended beyond digital releases. That period saw her take practical, expensive steps toward creative autonomy.
Martian Engineering Studios.
Right. Fueled by the desire to distance herself physically and creatively from record company executives, she converted the barn of her home in Cornwall, UK, into this high-tech, customized studio.
She was literally building her own autonomous creative bunker, guaranteeing that future decisions would be made on her terms, miles away from executive interference.
And the sound immediately reflected that new freedom. From the Choir Girl Hotel in '98 and to Venus and back in '99 marked a major and, I think, controversial shift.
For some fans, yeah. Her trademark acoustic, piano-based sound largely gave way to arrangements heavy with elements of electronica, synthetic beats, and dance music. It was a challenging shift for some of her original audience.
The thematic focus also evolved, concentrating intensely on womanhood, the painful experience of her miscarriages, and her marriage to sound engineer Mark Hawley in 1998.
And From the Choir Girl Hotel actually holds her record for best debut sales, moving 153,000 copies in its first week.
And To Venus and Back achieved another digital milestone.
The first major label single available for sale as a digital download. She was constantly pushing the boundaries of how music was created and consumed, refusing to be pigeonholed as just a piano girl.
Okay, now this is the crux of the Atlantic saga. She had fulfilled a large chunk of her contract, but she felt the label hadn't promoted her correctly since 1998, and critically, they refused to sell her contract to another interested party.
So she was stuck.
Which brings us to one of the most brilliant contractual exit strategies in modern music.
Look, it's a strategic masterstroke. The motivation for Strange Little Girls in 2001 was explicit.
To fulfill her final contractual obligation to Atlantic.
Without giving them any original Tori Amos material they could control in the future,
Yeah.
she weaponized the cover album concept.
And the concept was fantastic, deeply intellectual and subversive. She covered songs written by men about women,
From Eminem to the Beatles.
but reversed the gender roles and presented them from a female perspective, shining a light on the often misogynistic or one-dimensional view of women in those original lyrics.
And the album artwork reinforced this, featuring Amos photographed in character as the women portrayed in each song. A true, integrated concept album designed to satisfy her contract while maintaining total artistic control.
So having finally shed the Atlantic contract, she signs with Epic Records in late 2001. Her first album for Epic, Scarlet's Walk from 2002, demonstrated that her conceptual ambition had only grown more intense.
It was described not just as an album, but as a sonic novel comprising a massive 18 tracks.
We need to spend a moment on this. This album is a sprawling post-9/11 epic. It follows her alter ego, Scarlet, a sort of modern-day spiritual cartographer,
On a metaphorical cross-country road trip across America in the wake of the attacks.
The album used the concept of the road trip as a device to unpack the state of the American psyche.
Through Scarlett's journey, she explored deeply complex and sometimes controversial topics.
The history of America, particularly Native American history, and the violence against the land and its people.
As well as highly contemporary social issues like pornography, homophobia, and misogyny. It was a dense thematic undertaking.
Yet it was a commercial success, debuting strongly at #7 on the Billboard 200. And this album, significantly, is her last album to date to reach certified gold status from the RIAA.
It marks the high point of her critical and commercial conceptual reach.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, the shift to Epic was, well, it was short-lived. Not due to her work, but due to internal industry turmoil.
Right. Polly Anthony, the president who was the primary reason Amos signed with Epic, resigned in 2003.
And then Epic Sony Music merged with BMG Entertainment in 2004, so it was just chaos.
That internal chaos within the labels provided the perfect conditions for her eventual full independence.
Despite the instability around her, she continued to deliver these incredibly dense, high-concept albums. The Beekeeper in 2005.
Was conceptually influenced by the ancient art of beekeeping, which she saw as a profound metaphor for female spiritual organization and empowerment.
But the conceptual rabbit hole went much, much deeper.
Is certainly did. This is where she dove into the theological history she had been touching on since the beginning. She wove in intensive research into the Gnostic Gospels.
And for listeners, these are non-canonical Christian texts, meaning they were excluded from the official biblical canon, and they often feature strong female spiritual figures and different interpretations of creation and the divine.
By incorporating Gnostic theology, she was directly confronting and critiquing the history of women's systematic removal from power within the traditional Christian church.
So it's an album rooted in religion, politics, and ancient mythology, disguised as a contemporary pop record.
And that dedication paid off in terms of audience loyalty. The Beekeeper debuted at U.S. number 5 on the Billboard 200, securing her in an elite group of women who achieved 5 or more U.S. top 10 album debuts.
Which demonstrated an extraordinary resilience in a rapidly fragmenting music market.
She followed that up in 2007 with American Doll Posse, another concept album, this time structured around 5 distinct alter egos, which she called the Posse.
And this saw her return to a more aggressive, politically confrontational musical style, using these invented characters as mouthpieces.
The album allowed her to explore different facets of the political and emotional landscape post The Beekeeper without confining herself to a single voice. And the supporting tour was maybe the most theatrical of her career.
Because Amos opened the shows, dressed and performing as one of the 4 non-Tory persona, Isabel, Clyde, Pip, or Santa, before emerging as herself for the rest of the show.
She was blending conceptual art, theater, and music, demanding the audience engage with the concept beyond just the listening experience.
But the label tension, fueled by both creative and financial disagreements with a merged chaotic epic, persisted.
And so in May 2008, she negotiated a clean end to that contract, effectively opting to operate independently of major labels for future core work.
This moment, finally free after 20 years of major label servitude, is the pivot toward her next great era.
Exactly. When she did engage with the industry again, it was under vastly different terms. Later that year, she signed a joint venture deal with Universal Republic Records.
This is significant. A joint venture typically gives the artist much more creative and financial control than a standard recording contract.
This partnership produced Abnormally Attracted to Sin in 2009, which she explicitly called a personal album, a respite from the high-concept albums.
Exploring themes of power, boundaries, and the subjective view of sin.
And it was highly successful commercially, debuting in the top 10, her 7th album to do so. She proved she could achieve major success while retaining creative oversight.
She then broadened her genre appeal even further in late 2009 with Midwinter Graces,
her first seasonal album.
But it wasn't just a simple collection of covers. It featured reworked traditional carols mixed with original songs she wrote specifically for the project, showing her intellectual curiosity applied to the holiday season.
But the biggest, most surprising artistic shift came next, the classical turn.
In 2011, she released Night of Hunters on the prestigious Deutsche Grammophon label, home to some of the world's most renowned classical musicians.
And this was not a pop album. This was a classical-style music album featuring variations on themes by legendary composers like Bach, Chopin, Debussy, and Satie, recorded with the Apollon Musijet String Quartet.
This was the prodigy coming full circle, but on her own mature terms.
She wasn't fighting the classical canon anymore. She was engaging with it as a peer, using her own compositions to interpret and elaborate on the great masters.
It required technical mastery that few of her contemporaries could ever attempt.
And she solidified this classical contemporary blend the following year. Marking the 20th anniversary of Little Earthquakes, she released Gold Dust in 2012.
Which featured songs from her back catalog, reworked and re-recorded with the Metropole Orchestra, a fascinating blend of contemporary songwriting and classical orchestration.
And during this period of artistic consolidation, she also took a step toward becoming a true industry leader, founding her own record label, Transmission Galactic, in 2012.
Explicitly intending to use it to develop new artists. The woman who fought the system was now creating a new system.
She also perfectly balanced these classical projects with major work for the stage. In 2013-2014, her adaptation of George MacDonald's The Light Princess premiered at London's Royal National Theatre.
Which proved she could translate her conceptual brilliance and musical range into a formal, collaborative musical theater setting.
And following 4 years immersed in classical projects, orchestra arrangements, and stage work, she returned to her signature sound with Unrepentant Geraldines in 2014.
Described as a necessary return to her core identity as a creator of contemporary songs, signaling a full-circle moment back to the piano-driven style that defined her breakthroughs, but informed by all the classical and theatrical work she had just completed. So, we've covered the musical shifts, the genre expansions, and the label battles, but her legacy is equally and powerfully defined by her activism.
Absolutely. In June 1994, she co-founded the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAINN.
A toll-free helpline connecting callers with local rape crisis centers.
This was rooted in her own trauma, but the activism became a public component of her art. Amos revealed in 1994 that she was raped at knife point when she was 22, an incident she did not report to authorities.
And that experience, which informed the writing of Me and a Gun on Little Earthquakes, fueled her advocacy.
She answered the ceremonial first call to launch the hotline and served as the first national spokesperson. She's remained closely associated with RAINN ever since. Her commitment has been unwavering.
Her second memoir, Resistance, a songwriter's story of hope, change, and courage from 2020, further examines these themes of trauma and reclamation through the lens of her songwriting process.
It demonstrates how her personal story and her activism are fundamentally interwoven with her creative output. She uses her art to process and to advocate.
Moving to personal connections and intellectual collaborations, we have to discuss the unique relationship she forged with fantasy author Neil Gaiman.
Oh yeah. He became a fan after she referenced him in her song, Tear in Your Hand. He was so inspired by her that he created the character Delirium in the Sandman series based on her.
Even though the character predated their meeting.
The connection between them is just deep and profound.
And what's fascinating here is how the relationship is mutually reinforcing. It blurs the lines between their respective fictional worlds.
Gaiman has stated that they steal shamelessly from each other, referencing the exchange of ideas and inspiration between their music and literature.
He is the godfather to her daughter, Natasha, and they have collaborated on multiple print projects, including the graphic novel Tori Amos, Little Earthquakes in 2022, and her co-authored autobiography, Piece by Piece.
She truly exists at the nexus of music, literature, and visual art.
Another critical personal and spiritual context that informs her later work is her Cherokee heritage on her mother's side of the family.
Right. She speaks specifically about ancestors who evaded the forced relocation of the Trail of Tears by taking refuge in the Great Smoky Mountains.
And her maternal grandfather, Calvin Clinton Copeland, was a major source of spiritual inspiration for her. He provided a pantheistic spiritual alternative to the traditional Christianity of her father's ministry.
That cultural and spiritual heritage directly informed her 2017 album, Native Invader.
The project was inspired by a trip through the Smokies and explored complex, deeply timely themes surrounding American politics and environmental issues.
It shows her continued ability to weave deeply personal histories with the broadest social critique possible.
Let's look at her most modern work. Ocean to Ocean from 2021 was written and recorded in the isolated environment of her Cornish studio during the COVID-19 lockdown.
She described it as a universal story of going to rock bottom and renewing yourself all over again, reflecting the emotional toll of isolation and global uncertainty.
And this album notably saw her reunite with longtime collaborators, drummer Matt Chamberlain and bassist John Evans.
Their first collaboration on a studio album since 2009. A big deal for fans.
She continues to generate new forms of media at a rapid pace. This year is highly productive. She announced the 2024 release of the live album Diving Deep Live,
chronicling her 2022-2023 Ocean to Ocean tour.
And in early 2025, she is releasing the illustrated children's book Tori and the Muses, along with a surprise companion album, The Music of Tori and the Muses, featuring 9 original songs.
She is perpetually moving forward, simultaneously exploring high art and accessible children's literature.
Her lasting influence on the generation of artists who followed her is massive and highly diverse. Artists from Alanis Morissette, Amy Lee of Evanescence,
Halsey, Justin Timberlake, Olivia Rodrigo, St. Vincent.
They've all cited her as an inspiration or admirer, demonstrating her crossover appeal from alternative rock to pop.
She was also voted 5th best touring act by Rolling Stone readers in 2003. Famed for her legendary and demanding live structure where she changes her set list nightly, ensuring no 2 shows are ever the same.
A true commitment to her audience and her catalog.
Now we turn to the immediate future, which is perhaps the most explicit, unapologetic political statement of her career.
In October 2025, Amos announced her upcoming 18th studio album, In Times of Dragons, slated for release in 2026. This is not a subtle conceptual album.
No, it is defined by a massive, provocative metaphor. She explicitly defined the work as a metaphorical story about the fight for democracy over tyranny.
And we have to emphasize that the language she used in the album announcement was highly charged.
The source material quotes her as describing the concept as, and I'm quoting here, reflecting the current, abhorrent, non-accidental burning down of democracy in real time by the dictator-believing lizard demons in their usurpation of America.
This confirms her total commitment to being a direct political chronicler in the most fantastical yet urgently specific terms possible.
Using mythology to address immediate political reality.
And the accompanying 2026 World Tour is also set to introduce a highly significant new element that fundamentally alters her famously intimate stage structure.
The tour will feature her first-ever live use of a trio of backing vocalists, alongside bassist John Evans and drummer Ash Sohn.
This shift suggests a deliberate change in how this monumental political concept will be delivered, moving from the intimate solo confession to a potentially larger, more choral and communal statement.
So as we look back on this journey, what stands out as the ultimate synthesis for you, the learner?
I think the crucial takeaway is that Tori Amos' career is defined by a relentless commitment to artistic integrity.
Even when it meant fighting for 15 years to exit a record contract without compromising her original vision.
It's defined by her genius for intellectual and personal connection, whether through her activism with RAINN, her friendship with Neil Gaiman, or her reliance on that complex spiritual framework derived from her heritage and her upbringing.
And fundamentally, it is defined by her uncanny ability to weave classical technique, that internal architecture of light and sound she sees, with deeply volatile, contemporary political, religious, and social themes.
She is the ultimate self-directed artist who used technical genius and conceptual complexity as armor against the demands of the commercial industry.
Proving that the more specific and honest the artistic vision, the broader its ultimate reach.
And that leads us to our provocative final thought. The source material details her imminent return to explicitly political and social themes with the 2026 album In Times of Dragons, framing the concept entirely around the fight for democracy over tyranny.
Considering her deep roots in religious and political commentary, dating back to albums like Scarlet's Walk and The Beekeeper, what is the ultimate impact of a seasoned, independent artist dedicating her future work entirely to this metaphorical battle, using language as uncompromising as dictator-believing lizard demons?
And perhaps more importantly for the live experience, how might the addition of live backing vocalists for the first time in her touring history dramatically change the delivery and perceived intimacy of her famously raw stage performance?
Transforming a personal address into a collective choir of resistance. It's a complete restructuring of her relationship with the audience, precisely when the message is at its most urgent.
Something for you to chew on until our next deep dive.